It is May 27, 2025, and this is episode 17, and it is a follow-up to episode 12 about the missing audit. And rather than repeat what that's all about, if you want to go back and check out episode 12, that might make this episode more understandable. But basically, the City Commission and Audit concerning anti-corruption matters, and a draft report was issued in December of 22, and that's when the trail grew cold. And so we're picking it up. We're picking up the trail right now, and in addition to just the findings of the audit, and we'll discuss those. The recommendations are good recommendations. Unfortunately, I don't think the city has adopted a single one of them. But in addition to all that, the way the audit was managed was highly irregular. And I don't really understand exactly what happened, but once the contract is signed, the auditor goes to work and produces a deliverable. And it's fine to check in along the way, but what happened here, according to the draft report, is that there's a footnote in the draft report that says that the city basically, it says that, let me just read it. And again, this is in episode 12, but this is very pertinent. After discussion with the city, Crowe's performance under this ordinance is an assessment under the AICPA's consulting standards and is not a forensic audit. Well, when they put that in the draft report and the Inquirer reported on it, the city got very defensive, and they rejected the audit and said that they're going to be working with Crowe to do a better job or something like that. And that was in December of 22, and a final report wasn't issued until November of 23. They issued an amendment to the contract in November of 23 and gave Crowe 30 days, or not even 30 days, to the end of the month to wrap things up. And the city has not implemented a single one of the recommendations for an audit that took 2 years from beginning to end, or almost 2 years from beginning to end. So it's highly irregular. One of the things that was very noticeable to me is that when the draft report was issued, and the city manager wrote this memo to the mayor and the council about rejecting it. Well, the contract calls for the city to provide comments to the auditor on the draft report. And the way it would normally work is that the auditor issues the report, its recommendations, and the whole purpose of the draft report is for the auditee to review it and take issue with anything in there that they think is not factual or improperly reported or whatever, and they're supposed to respond to the recommendations. That's just the way it works. And it was in the contract that that's the way it would work, but that's not the way it worked. Who knows what went on, except this memo that the city manager wrote. And what's this business about working with them? You signed a contract. It's all governed by the contract. If you want to renegotiate the contract, you do that. But I don't understand all that. So Crowe LLP had its hands full, I think, with the city, and I think it would be worthwhile to get a better understanding of exactly what went on with this, with all these shenanigans on the contract management. So anyway, that's just my view of that. I can't imagine dealing with the city on that, all over this, bad press that they got. So anyway, I think the important thing is that we did get some recommendations from Crowe that are fairly good. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and again, as far as I can tell, and it's hard to tell on some of these because some of these are totally behind the scenes. But the 6 recommendations do, go to how to improve the ethical operation of the city council, and to address, conflicts of interest and things like that. So I thought I would just run through the recommendations. Like I said, there's 6 of them. 1 is council member recusals. 2 is suspension of 3 readings. 3 is city business conflicts of interest. And both 2 and 3, as I reported back in episode 12, are totally critical recommendations. Number 4 is conflict of interest survey, and this was interesting. This was new information, and I'll talk about that. Number 5 has to do with the hotline, and I can tell you that I don't think they do any of this unless it's just not made public. And then there's something about financial disclosure requirements. So the council member recusals are all about what process should council members go through when they have to recuse themselves. So how the recusal should be communicated, what information should be included in the recusal, to whom the recusal should be communicated, when the recusal should be submitted, etc. And presumably all that should be spelled out for a recusal by one of the members. And I don't know whether that's the case or not. I mean, some of this takes so much follow-up and research. It wants to create a new position or expand on a current city position to review council members' Office of Ethics or Ohio Ethics Commission financial disclosure statements before they vote on it. So they're recommending that somebody on the staff be assigned to review the agenda, the meeting agenda, and review the conflict of interest surveys that they conduct to say whether there's any potential conflicts. So I don't think they do that. Distinguish in the ordinance meeting minutes or in the voting records published on the city's website whether the council member's absent vote is due to recusal, abstention, or a physical absence that day unrelated to a conflict of interest. So right now, if the member is absent from the vote, you don't know why they're absent. You don't know if they're abstaining, whether they're recused, or whether they are whether they are just gone sick. They had a schedule conflict or whatever. They don't do that now. It was like with the Planning Commission on Hyde Park Square. 3 of the Planning Commission members didn't show up. So you don't know whether they recused themselves, whether they were sick, whether they just didn't feel like going. But that's what this recommendation is all about. I think it's a good recommendation. They don't do that. So the next one is the big one for me. Suspension of the 3 readings. This was in the draft report. And this isn't mentioned by the city manager when she transmitted the final report. She said some things, but not this. They are recommending that they reduce the 3 the emergency orders and the waiving of the 3 readings. So they have data in here they give a number or a percentage of how many of the ordinances that they looked at were by emergency, and they only looked at 33 or 36, I think. They looked at 36 ordinances in their sample, and 100% were emergency ordinances. And I'm not sure which episode it was, but I speculated it would be above 90%. And at least in their sample, it was 100%. So anyway, that's one aspect of this recommendation. You gotta bring that number down. But the other part of it was to not only pass it as an emergency by 3/4 or whatever it is, but they should be required to put in the ordinance the reason it was a emergency, or the reason why they are waiving the three rules. It says the city should include any potential financial, contractual, or reputational risk that could arise if the ordinance is not passed immediately during council's first reading. And those are things that you would legitimately say, we got to go. And some of those are, in the meeting minutes. If you have a contract that you've got to fund like right away, yeah, that's an emergency, fine. But the problem is that so many things are emergencies. Like Connected Communities was an emergency. They could have used, Crowe has an example in here of the lame excuses that are used for emergency ordinances. And if you go back and look at the excuse that they gave on Connected Communities, it's equally lame. Their excuse was so lame. Oh, we have to pass this as an emergency because we need housing so poorly or so badly. So that is big, and that's not going to happen either. They haven't done that. So the next one, city business conflicts of interest. So we also learned, and I was going to do an episode on this, but overtaken by events. There's also a temporary prohibition list that if you're doing business with the city, you go on a list, and then the politicians can't request or ask for contributions from you while you're on that list. Anyway, they want to expand the scope of doing business. What that means, they want to expand the doing business duration, which right now is like 6 months, and they want to expand it to a year. But anyway, that's 2 parts of that recommendation. But the third part we talked about in episode 12, and that is to require that this is what it says: document council's involvement in selecting vendors during line item discretionary appropriations. Establish additional safeguards to limit council's ability to attach money to a specific firm without providing sufficient justification over vendor selection. And what we talked about in episode 12 is that what this is describing is the process that the city uses for leverage support, where the mayor and the city council can just add or subtract from the manager's recommendation on leverage support, and they don't need to give any justification. So that's a big problem for me, and that's what this recommendation is all about. They're talking about it in the context of contracts and things like that, but it also applies to this leverage support. All right, number 4 is conflict of interest. And we're at minute 14, so we'll wrap this up. Conflict of interest survey. This was a new thing. Basically, I shouldn't say a new thing. This is something that I didn't know about. But anyway, when you go on council, you fill out a conflict of interest survey. That is, I haven't seen the survey. I'm going to ask for it. It's not online. They keep all that stuff behind the scenes. Anyway, the council members fill out this conflict of interest survey, and then that helps the ethics counselor to know whether or not, they need to recuse themselves on certain things. So they think that there could be greater clarity on that survey and make some recommendations. They also recommend that they hold an annual conflict of interest training for all city employees. They're not doing that. They're not doing any of this. And they want the ethics, fraud, waste, and abuse hotline. They want the findings much better documented. When did the investigation start? When did it end? Who did it? What did you find? They want all of that added to these hotline complaints, and they're not doing that because I've seen some of the results from the hotlines, and they don't do any of that. And then finally, they talk about basically strengthening the financial disclosure requirement. It's all very, very, you think this is down in the weeds. So we don't think that any of these have been implemented. So we spent $150,000 in 2 years and all kinds of irregularities in the audit management process for nothing. And I'm starting to get the feeling like these members of council, I don't think they read audit reports. We're going to be going down to the City Hall, to the Budget Committee, and talk about a couple of audit reports that there's no way the City Council read those, or if they read them, they sure didn't do anything about that either. And that has to do with the fleet, the vehicle purchase and procurement audit that was done by the internal auditor. And the other one was dealing with this leverage support recipient that the internal auditor found was basically unauditable. And number one, the city manager is going to be presenting some kind of plan for fleet purchase or something like that. And the budget is going to be brought forward. And the question would be, this recipient that the internal auditor found to be unauditable, are they going to be getting more money again this year? Shouldn't you fix, their problem before you give them more money? So we're going to go down and talk about that. And the other thing I wanted to mention is that I'm close to putting together, or what would you call it, launching a website for the podcast here, so that I can start putting some of these documents online, like the audit report for Crowe, or the city budget, even if we wanted to do that. But basically put links and documents online concerning the podcast here, so that you all can see, some of this evidence and some of this documentation for yourself. So we're going to try to do that. I can't promise you that it's going to be within 30 days, but we're working on it.